Brandon Davis is the co-founder of Interval and the host of the Get Over Yourself podcast. We dive into Brandon's fascinating journey from completing his Latter-day Saints mission to starting a business-focused podcast aimed at young entrepreneurs. We discuss the importance of taking action, staying committed, and finding passion in your work. Brandon also shares invaluable insights about his startup Interval, which automates the collection process for small to medium-sized businesses and offers advice for budding entrepreneurs navigating the modern business landscape. As always, if you found value from this content, please like and subscribe. And now here's my conversation with Brandon Davis. Enjoy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Beyond Fulfillment podcast. I'm your host, Dave Goulas. This week, my guest is the co-founder of Interval and the host of the Get Over Yourself podcast, Brandon Davis. Welcome, Brandon.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It was kind of fun. You sent me a LinkedIn message, and then a week and a half later, here we are. I love it.
Yeah. We move quick.
We move quick in this world. I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, appreciate you being here. If you could, for everyone, can you tell us what the Get Over Yourself podcast is and how you got it started?
Yeah, so Get Over Yourself podcast. I was just mentioning this to you off air. So for anyone out there who's maybe heard of it or listened to a couple episodes, thank you. It's kind of a lifelong pursuit of mine. I started it 3 years ago. I'm LDS, and so I had just finished an LDS mission. And for anyone who doesn't know, it's a Christian faith. Went out on a mission. I helped people in Brazil and Texas learn about Jesus Christ. And when I got back, a lot of LDS missionaries, we struggle with a thing when we get home of, I have no idea what I want to do with my life now. So I graduated high school, and the next 2 years I spent dedicated towards Jesus Christ and helping my brothers and sisters here on this earth. So I finished my 2-year mission, and I got back, and I was just in there praying one day. I'm like, I have no idea what I want to do with my life right now. Absolutely no idea. And so as I was praying one day, I just, for whatever reason, I got this very strong thought. I was never a huge podcast junkie. I listened to occasional podcasts, nothing absolutely crazy. For whatever reason, God put it in my head. He said, you need to start this podcast, and you need to start it around your message of get over yourself. Since then, it's kind of taken the curves and the edges and everything in between. But the initial start behind it was just helping young adults and specifically young entrepreneurs figure out what on earth they're trying to do with their lives and how they can make the world a better place. So it's a business podcast focused on self-development and helping you improve both in your business and your life. And we just surpassed our 3-year anniversary, which is super exciting.
Beautiful. Congrats on that. So when you get that idea to first start, like you said, you have no experience, and you just got back from the mission and you're figuring things out. Like, what was it like actually putting the podcast together and turning it into something tangible? What was that process like?
Everyone who wants to hear the process can go listen to episode 1. It's the funniest thing ever. I go back and I listen to it occasionally just to put a big smile on my face. Horribly edited. I was reading from a script. I didn't do a video at the time, so I literally had this big old notebook with me, and I would have all my points written out. So sometimes I go a little off script, and then I go back and delete it. That episode probably took me 6 hours to edit. I was so nervous to launch it, but when I first got this impression inside of my head, it was a very strong impression. I've had a lot of interactions with God before in my life, but this was one of the strongest where it was a clear, like, go and do this. And I just remember when I first got started on it, I was like, okay, I'm trusting you on this process, God. I don't really know what I'm doing. And so I put it out on Instagram. I said, hey, starting a show called Get Over Yourself. It'll be out in 3 days. Give the first episode a listen. And that was my initial direction. That was how I got my first push so I could release the first episode. So I launched that. The next day I recorded, the next day I edited, and then it was out. And so, yeah, I can't even describe it. It was absolutely horrible, but still my favorite episode to this day because it's the one that got me started.
Wow. And that's such a powerful message, meaning like just go do it, just take action and move past the fear, right? And that's something so many entrepreneurs or people that are just starting a business deal with. I mean, having done that and gotten through it, and like now you said like you've just had your 3-year anniversary. I mean, what's talk about what that's like, the power to just take action and do it even though you're not ready per se.
I think it's the best form of motivation if you commit yourself to something. I'm a firm believer. This may be a little off topic here, but Nothing drives my or grinds my gears worse than when we don't keep our own commitments to ourselves. Why is it then when you're working a job, you can go out and your boss says, "All right, you have to be here from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. every single night, and if you don't show up, you're fired." Why is it that we're motivated in that instance, but then when we tell ourselves, "All right, we're gonna go on our run tonight. We're gonna go and work out at the gym. We're gonna go on a diet." Why are these commitments for ourselves so much more difficult? We can have somebody else tell us something, and if we don't follow it, then we're fired, and that's the external fear of, okay, if I get fired, I'm not gonna have a job. If I don't have a job, that means no money. If no money means no rent or food, and obviously the contingencies go on. But at the end of the day, my biggest form of motivation is just telling myself I'm going to do something and then keeping my commitment with myself. Because I believe if you're somebody who can't keep a commitment to yourself, you're not going to be able to keep them in other relationships, whether that be a spiritual relationship with God, a physical relationship with a partner, or especially in your own mindset. And so, in the early days, whether it be a podcast, starting your business, like I already mentioned, some kind of diet or physical journey you're going through, my ultimate goal in life is to always keep my own commitments. Make sure if I tell somebody I'm going to be there, I will be there. Make sure to tell myself if I'm going to work out, I'm going to work out. Obviously, life happens and there's instances where things come up. But if you can try and keep that trajectory and always aim to keep your commitments with yourself and with others, I think that's the best place to start.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Right. And that's a great way to frame it too, in terms of that it's the most important commitment to keep is with yourself. And those things that are important. So you have this idea to start the podcast. Why specifically like a business and entrepreneurship podcast?
It's once again, a lot of it stems back to this. I don't know why, but for most of the reason, it stems back to God and just Him putting it inside of my head and me eventually working on it. It's transitioned a little bit, so I've always been business centered. It's something I've grown up around. My favorite show when I was back in like sixth grade, I remember I'd get home and from school or sports, and my dad, he's a very busy guy, but he always made time for his family, me, my siblings, my mom. And so some days he would still have work to do. He'd get home, he'd sit on the couch, pull out his laptop, and he'd sit on the couch. And then after my practices and homework and stuff, I'd go sit on the couch with him and we'd watch Shark Tank together. So I remember from a very young age, that was my ultimate favorite show. If we weren't watching the Dodger baseball game, we're watching Shark Tank. And I just remember watching these so-called average citizens, somebody you could sit next to on a bus, walk past in the grocery store, sit next to in your church congregation. These were people who were average people, average citizens who were making something extraordinary. So I remember from a young age, I would look and just be like, I want to be like those guys. I want to have my own product or service or something that people will buy. And so I think that stems from a very early age of just loving entrepreneurship. And then just for the fact that a lot of us young entrepreneurs out there, a lot of us young business owners, our biggest sense of direction comes from people 20, 30, 40 years down in life who have already made it successful. I remember when I was in school and I go to these lecture series of these powerful entrepreneurs, they'd come in and they would speak and give us great advice. This is how you 10x your company. This is how you create a life of success. This is how you be a good partner. Very practical advice. But there was always a little bit of a disconnect because some of these people I'd be talking to or listening to, they're 20, 30 years earlier in their stage. And I'm sure you've heard the saying here, David, that if you want to find a positive mentor, try and find somebody 5 to 10 years in front of where you're at and just mold exactly what you want from them. And so this disconnect I found was, okay, these people are awesome. They're giving really good advice, but their advice is also 20 to 30 years in front of where I'm at. I want to help people that are a little bit younger than me, around my same age, and grow from there. And so the podcast specifically, when I'm not just speaking and rambling on by myself, I invite other guests who are young entrepreneurs who are barely a little bit older than us, so we can kind of get that same advice that I'm hoping for. Because once again, if you find a mentor, you want them to be about 5 to 10 years in front of you, not always 30 to 40 years in front of you.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay. So the fact that you can have people closer to your own skill level, so to speak, and of course, age range, so they kind of know a lot more relatable to what you're going through.
Exactly. I mean, I'm sure you've gotten advice before, and I'm not saying it's bad advice, but let's picture when I sit down and talk with my dad about the housing issues here in the United States. Back when he was younger, him and my mom got their first house, it was easier for them to buy it. And so sitting down and talking about this nowadays, it's kind of funny. We bicker back and forth about, oh, your generation just doesn't work hard enough, and then I can show him the graphs that make it a little bit different on what he's saying. But there's just a disconnect when it comes to different age groups. He can offer really good practical advice, but sometimes you just need somebody a little bit closer in age to give you that advice. So that's what I've tried to form with my show specifically is, hey, any young entrepreneur out there, anyone who's between the age of 18 to 30, this show is for you. This is the one that's going to help you, give you mentors and advice for people who are right up in the thick of it, of being able to help your age range, because they understand it. They understand the new age of doing marketing on social media. They understand sales. They understand it because it changes constantly. And so I believe you need people who have lived it a little bit more than they are just preaching it later in life.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. And being, like you said, you're very new out of high school, and just had the went on the mission and had the podcast. So what I've noticed too is there's such a stronger push these days for young people wanting to go the entrepreneurship route as opposed to the traditional go to college, get a degree, get a job type of thing. I mean, can you talk about what that's like, kind of being that you're just so new out of high school in terms of what that path looks like and what we're seeing in the world today, as opposed to like how valuable a college education is, as opposed to maybe just starting bootstrapping a business.
Yeah, and I think I kind of fit in the middle ground. I can go on a 3 hour long rant about what I feel about college. Not a huge fan for the most part, but I think it completely depends on how you use your experience, and where specifically you go. So as I mentioned, I'm LDS, so as most of you could probably assume, I go to BYU, and I've surrounded myself with other BYU students who fit my kind of mold. I'm the vice president of a club here called Seed. That everyone at BYU who owns a business can join this club. It's basically a club for business owners at BYU. So I surround myself with all these other business owners, from marketing agencies to, in the office right next to me, there's a shoe company. They make gym shoes. Across the way, there's software companies. Obviously, we're running a software company. And so I surrounded myself in college with people I want to be surrounded with later in life. And so on that aspect, I think it's an amazing move. I think any founder, if they choose a university and an atmosphere that they could place themselves in for success, it's a great route. But then I see on the flip side, I have a lot of friends from back in school, back when I was in high school 6 years ago. I have a lot of friends who chose a more traditional route. I grew up in Southern California. A lot of them went on to UC schools, really great schools. But I also see on social media and just keeping up with them, their weekends consist of constantly just partying. They're gonna go through this degree. They're gonna go get their internships. They're gonna go get their 9 to 5 career, and that's gonna be their life for the next 40 years. And to each their own. If that's something you're striving for, that is absolutely awesome. Happy for you. Go party. Go have a good time. Go find that job that you can kind of just scale your way up over the course of your career, and great. But, that wasn't the path I wanted to take, and so I surrounded myself with these other students who were like-minded, who would push me, and so we meet together often. Every day, I can go ask them advice, they can ask me advice, we can bounce ideas back and forth, and that's just something you don't get necessarily on your own. If I was not to have gone to BYU, I still would probably be working on some sort of business. I can promise you, I don't think it would have been Interval, which is absolutely crushing it right now. I don't think I would have had as much advice as I've been given. I don't think I would have had the mentors I've been given. And I think so it all stems back from starting my journey out here in BYU, but it also stems because I put myself in that atmosphere. So
Okay. And so speaking of Interval, can you tell us more about that startup and what you do?
yeah, absolutely. So we automate collections, the internal collections process for small businesses to medium-sized businesses. So any business right now that currently has customers who owe them money, we help them collect on that money so they don't have a huge cash flow discrepancy. We work with all types of businesses in the medical field and service-based businesses, a lot of monthly subscription SaaS services, all in an effort to make sure that their customers are paying what they owe. We found this huge pain point where a lot of business owners nowadays, their cash flow is all over the place. They have a ton of money sitting in accounts receivable that they aren't collecting on. Most of them don't have the time or the means to actually send somebody to collections or small claims court. They just don't have the staffing for it, and so they were losing on average, depending on the business, obviously, anywhere between $30,000 to $500,000 per year of this money that they should have earned because they sold a product, they performed a service, and their customers simply weren't paying. And so what we do is we automate that process of the outreach where we will contact your customers for you. We will get them to pay up on their balances. And it's amazing because we get to see day in and day out all this money that these businesses were just letting kind of go to the wayside actually collect. And these businesses now get to grow their operations. They get to hire more employees and staff. They get to buy new equipment. It's a fun industry to be in because these businesses, they perform their end of the service, or they sold their product, But then customers who are a little bit more shady or fell on hard times, whatever it may be, they didn't hold up their end of the agreement, which is paying what they owe. And so it's been fun to actually help these businesses transform and make sure that they get paid what they are owed.
Freight shippers, are you tired of dealing with unreliable freight brokers? Tired of delays, missed delivery appointments, and no one to talk to? Tired of unpleasant surprises, reclass, reweighs, and the invoice always being higher than the quote? Well, you can enjoy a better freight experience with SPI Logistics. I joined SPI as a freight agent to deliver that better freight experience to our 3PL customers. SPI has 30,000 vetted and approved carriers, all modes of transportation, so we can tailor the equipment to the shipment, and the fully trained and experienced operations team who is always available to help. And you'll get the same quality customer service that you've come to expect when you deal with me. If you've got freight to move, go to freightbydave.com. That's freightbydave.com. Okay. And so what got you into starting that?
We surveyed, I can't even tell you how many businesses we sat down with, hundreds and hundreds. When we first started out, the business journey throughout Interval has been quite interesting. A few different products, and this is my advice I give to any young founder out there who's trying to find the product that they want to work on. Get an early idea of customer pain points. Just go out and survey any type of business that you're interested in or industry that you're interested in. Go and survey them. Go and sell them an idea. Don't sell them a product yet. Don't have anything built. Don't go get a manufacturing partner. Don't go start writing your code. Go and sell them the idea of a product. So you go talk to a bunch of them. You figure out what their pains are. Go and sell them an idea. And then from there, go out and build the product if they're actually interested. So that's a process we learned the hard way. We started with the latter, where we started writing out our code and making products, these software products for these businesses. We'd make it. We would spend a ton of time on them. Then we'd go and present it to different companies, and we'd sell a few of them, but not very many. We go present it, and they're like, we don't really have this issue. And so then we flipped our entire model, and we said, all right, we're going to sit down with business owners. We're not going to try and sell them anything. We're going to ask them, what are their pains when it comes to customer communication? That was our big question. What are your pains when it comes to customer communication? Our initial perception, one idea that we had started working on, but we took a step back. Our initial perception was they're going to say that they have a hard time managing customer communication over the phone. They get a lot of people calling in. They can't always answer the phone. They lose business. And yes, that was the case for some businesses, but a vast majority of them actually came back with this problem of, honestly, we don't have the staff to make these collection calls, or our staff, we hire them, but they quit after 2 months, or they're not very good at collecting. And so all of their issues were stemming around these collections and how much money they had sitting in accounts receivable. And so then we went back to the drawing board. We said, okay, how can we fix that? We obviously came up with Interval that automates that entire process of the outreach. And then we went back to those same businesses we had initially surveyed and had that issue. And oh my gosh, easiest sales on earth. These are the people we already surveyed. You just walk up and you say, hey, we solved your problem. Boom, sales. Because we had already talked to them and we'd already laid the groundwork.
Wow, that's interesting. So it took making mistakes and building something that wasn't the right fit, and that ultimately not working, to you pivoting and realizing, interview the customers first, find what their problems are, and then when you have enough of a pain point, go solve the solution for that, and then the sales take care of themselves from there.
Yeah, and looking back now, it's kind of funny. It's like, well, duh, Brandon. Well, of course, that's the process you should have took. But at the end of the day, when you're in the heat of everything, you just want customers, and you're dying to get a single customer. And so when one person tells you, "Hey, I have an issue with answering the phones," you go and build a product for that one person. Sometimes is that scalable? Absolutely. Sometimes you'll hit the jackpot, and that one customer will have the same issue that everybody has. But that was our issue early on. Even outside the customer communication platform, we set up other ideas and other MVPs of software products, and they were fine. They had a couple users, but they weren't scalable. And so then it was, looking back now, it's like, okay, yes, that is obviously the clear path. Go and survey, go and sell the product before you actually have it made. Then make the product to what your customers are expecting and grow from there.
Okay, interesting. And can you talk too about, because obviously, right, you're younger, you're very tech savvy, you're using social media and some of these other ways to market your business. Can you just talk about like the tools available and the technology available for starting a business, and like even a virtual business, so to speak, right, these days, and what that's like and the advantage that you have?
Yeah, and I'll preface it with this also. It's going to be different depending on what industry you're in. Ours is software, so it's nothing glamorous or sexy. A lot of product businesses these days can go make these TikTok posts and these Instagram reels, and they'll show off their physical product. Like I already mentioned, next door to me in an office space is a gym shoe company, so they can go out and they can have gym goers wear their shoes. They can go survey people about what they like on their social media platforms when it comes to gym shoes, and it's a very simple thing to go out and promote. As far as software, it's kind of interesting. You have companies that do it really well, like Duolingo is a great example, where they kind of made these caricatures that would go around, and you always see the bird on social media dancing and doing all these fun things. So they turned their software company into a physical product as well, or more of a physical brand. We're still trying to come up with our own social media strategies for Interval. It's very interesting. We're selling business to business. It's not a consumer product, so it's not like if I was going to sell to one of our chiropractors, we can make these amazing reels that would absolutely capture their attention. We're working on it, but at the end of the day, our biggest solution has been LinkedIn outreach and Facebook direct messaging a lot of these business owners and saying, hey, if you're like, we message in an industry. So one industry we hit pretty heavy on is chiropractors, pest control, random service-based businesses like that. So we can go and reach out to these people on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and say, hey, I know you're in the chiropractic industry, for example. I know you're in the chiropractic industry. I know many chiropractors in your area suffer with collections processes and getting your customers pay their full balance. We built this product. You interested in testing it for us? And just kind of throwing out this softball question. If they like it, awesome. If they don't, move on to the next one. So as far as like social media strategies, I think just getting your name out there as best you can, getting your branding out there, making sure eyes are actually clicking on your page, seeing your posts, understanding your product, being able to clearly identify what it does within the first couple seconds of looking there. Just simple little steps you can make. But once again, software compared to a physical product is going to be completely different.
Okay. And bringing it back to the podcast, you've been doing that for so long and you've talked to so many different entrepreneurs. Like, how has that helped you in terms of just learning from others, growing as a business
Well,
person, and then promoting as well?
I mean, as you've started your journey, I'm sure this you can answer this one just as good as I can. It's I think part of the reason why initially God was like, "Hey, Brandon, you need to start something like this," is for the fact that I've learned probably more than even all the listeners. When I get to sit down either on a FaceTime call like this or physically in person with somebody, the amount of information I can learn and digest for myself is just incredible. And I hopefully convey my questions and my hosting experience well enough so that the audience can learn those same benefits and everything. But at the same time, it's just amazing to sit down with these people. Like I said, I look for mentors who are a few years older than me that are a little bit down the road that they could share advice. And that stems from all different paths of life. In business specifically, I'll have sales experts, I'll have marketing experts, I'll have go to market experts, I'll have the product market fit experts. Like you can bring on these people who are very good in their industry and just learn. And that's the amazing thing about podcasts. And David, you understand this. It's free content. You put it out there so people can just learn. And you don't have very much of that these days. Sure, you might have some ads sprinkled in there occasionally, but it's so amazing to think you could sit down, listen to a podcast these days, and come out having no knowledge in one industry. And then after a 30-minute episode, an hour-long episode, and being knowledgeable in a specific space. Not perfect, but knowledgeable.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Like, getting to interview different entrepreneurs and successful people is just a wealth of knowledge that you get to soak up on every call. So absolutely.
Yeah, and
Uh,
it's not for everyone, but that's why we, as hosts like you and me, we're able to hopefully convey that message so people can listen to the content as well and learn from it just as much as we have.
Absolutely. So one thing I noticed about you too, just doing this interview, you're very passionate about what you do. I can tell you're really having fun in all these different projects you have. Um, like me personally, I'm in my mid 40s, so I encounter numerous people in the same age range where maybe they've gone down a career path and they're not happy and they're
Oh yeah.
looking for something else and they're transitioning, let's say, and trying to find something new. Like, can you just talk about from your perspective, like how important it is to just really enjoy what you do and be passionate about the work you're doing every day?
Yes, and I want to start off with this. I understand I'm in a different life situation than the majority of people who are in that boat. My wife and I, we don't have any kids yet. As far as our life expenses, it's pretty simple. I mean, we have our cars, we have our house, we have our food every month. But like as far as life goes, it's pretty simple in the phase we're at right now. So I'm not going to sit here and preach like a lot of people do. Oh, go and quit your job if you're not happy. Like I understand there's preparation that has to come with it. But I will say this at the end of the day, I wanted to create a life on my own aspect. And I knew what that meant for me was starting a business. And I know for the next 5 to 10 years, as I continue working on Interval, our goal is eventually to sell it and make a good profit. I know I'm going to go start another business and just be as successful because I know who I am. I'm that person at the very beginning of the episode. Like I mentioned, I'm the person who's going to hold the commitments to himself. So I know with Interval, it's going to go good. I know with whatever next business is going to go good because that's the way I frameworked my life. And I promise you, for everyone out there listening who feels stuck, who feels like they can't leave that corporate job, I'm not saying you have to do it immediately. I'm all for taking action, but also plan out your life and make sure you're going to be able to be successful in whatever you end up transitioning to. But at the end of the day, if you could just sit back and ask yourself, am I happy where I'm at right now? If you are, 100% keep it going. That is a blessing. Not very many people could say that these days. If you're not, though, it's time to have those honest conversations with yourself and say, what will make me happy? And sometimes you may not realize it. Sometimes in the moment, you may not think you're super happy. You go and experience something else and you realize, wow, I was actually really happy. So maybe that's what it takes. Press pause on your corporate career for a little bit, go transition, try something else. And maybe you recognize, okay, yeah, that wasn't very fun. I liked what I was doing. But at the end of the day, I would just sit down and be honest with myself and say, am I happy with what I'm doing? If I'm not, let's make a change. And if I am, great, we're gonna keep it going.
Okay. And if people want to find out more about Interval, and then of course the podcast too, can you just talk about what's the best way people can reach out to you and find out about these different projects you have?
Yeah, absolutely. Interval, you can learn more about at interval-ai.com. And then you could also search up the podcast, Get Over Yourself podcast. It's Spotify, Apple, YouTube, any major streaming platform it's on.
All right. We'll link all that in the show notes for everybody. All right. Well, Brandon, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. Had a great conversation, learned a lot, and I know the audience is going to benefit from all this wisdom that you shared. So thank you.
I appreciate it, David. Have a good one.
All right. That's all the time we have for now. We will see you next time.